pleased to be joined here for the second hour of the program by NFL Network draft analyst, NFL on CBS color analyst, Madden NFL commentator.
Yeah.
It's one Charles Davis joining us. And 'tis the season to do mock drafts, Charles.
Yes.
And you've submitted one, which can be found, for those of you wondering, at NFL.com. And I guess for our eager Bills fan listeners, we will begin with your pick at 25. And you go wide receiver. Tell us the choice and the reasons behind it, if you could, sir.
Certainly. You know, when I did it, I went with Jameson Williams, wide receiver from Alabama, who I think is the best receiver in the draft. But coming off of a knee injury in the national championship game, I dropped him down in my mock draft. Well, what's interesting is that mock draft dropped, Tuesday, I think, of this week? And here we are on Thursday. I heard from a number of NFL people already who said, hey, man, he's ahead of schedule on his rehab. He's not getting to 25. It was a very interesting deal that right out of the gate, I was told that my choice was wrong for that reason. But they liked where, a few people liked where I was going with it. You already have a strength at wide receiver. Look, you just re-signed Stephon Diggs. That's a huge deal. Gabriel Davis was a revelation in the playoffs last year, although you guys knew he was good already, but the rest of the world got to see it up close and personal in that Kansas City game. The picking up of Jamison Crowder to be your slot receiver. Isaiah McKenzie's performance against New England in the regular season last year has not been forgotten. And the emergence of Dawson Knox. But sometimes you take a strength and make it even stronger and make everyone chase you, which is something Kansas City has done for a while now. It's kind of top of the food chain in the AFC. This would give Buffalo a chance to do that. That's one of the reasons I went with Jameson Williams.
So if Jameson Williams is not available at number 25, a popular position, at least in the mock drafts that we have been tracking, have been cornerback for the Buffalo Bills in the first round. Convince us why cornerback could make sense for Buffalo at number 25, and if guys are even going to be available that late in the first round.
Maddie, I think that it won't take much convincing, because when you look at your cornerback roster in depth, tell me if I'm wrong here, right? Because you lost a young man out of Alabama named Levi Wallace, who I always thought, and I had this conversation with Brandon Bean, your GM, and Brandon said it perfectly, because I always said, I don't know about his gifts, but he plays well. And he said, yeah, he's a better 11-on-11 player than one-on-one player, which means within a team concept, et cetera, he plays pretty darn well. Well, he's no longer there. Is Dane Jackson really stamped that corner position? You're trying to get Tre'Davious White back to being Tre'Davious White, coming off the injury last year, I believe, that happened around Thanksgiving. So when you put it all together, you're still looking for those lockdown corners in the division now that just changed a little bit with Tyreek Hill going to Miami. And let's see if Tua's going to unleash him. Zach Wilson trying to get his legs underneath him in New York and throw the football. And don't be surprised, guys, if the Jets go for a wide receiver, one of their 2 first-round picks. So when you put it all together and everyone's trying to figure it all out, absolutely. So who could be there at that point? Maddie, you asked that question. There are 2 corners at the University of Washington, Trent McDuffie and Kyler Gordon. Most people have Trent McDuffie rated higher. I have him going higher in the teens in my mock draft. Kyler Gordon could be that guy that pops up late in the first round and becomes a first-round pick playing on the corner. Kaiir Elam from the University of Florida could be a guy around that range. Roger McCreary, corner from Auburn, could be in that range. All of them possibles, all of them available at that time frame. And it makes absolute sense because you need some depth, and you're still looking probably for a starter out on one of the corners here in Buffalo.
What do you think, Charles, about the Andrew Booth kid out of Clemson? I mean, he's a guy that, at least from what I understand, had to get some sports hernia surgery, and so he hasn't really tested. He's expected to be recovered by training camp. You know, you mentioned how Jameson Williams, apparently his status is going to be unaffected by his ACL. This is an injury that I think most would deem even less serious than that.
Yeah.
Do you see him still on the board in the mid to late 20s?
It's a possibility, Chris. I've got him going in my mock draft, and as we all know, mock drafts are not exactly be-all, end-alls, right? What's our famous expression about mock drafts? When you put out a mock draft, prepare to be mocked. okay? Because that's what's going to happen to you, right? And that's just the hazards of the business. We understand that. But I don't, in my mock draft, I've got him going to Philadelphia, okay? And that's a little bit earlier, again, in the teens. The reason I've got him going there is they've got Darius Slay as their CB1. They're looking for a CB2, and they play a ton of zone with Jonathan Gannon as their defensive coordinator. If you flip on the tape with Andrew Booth and watch how he plays, there's a lot of what we call bail technique, side saddle, looking back in at the quarterback, a lot of zone coverage, has some toughness. He'll come up and tackle you. He'll do all things you're looking for. That's why I had him going into teens. But to your question specifically, does that mean he's not available? No, not at all. Depends on the flavor, depends on what run we get during the draft. There may be some guys that emerge that we so-called analysts don't have rated as highly. And how come every year, no matter what you do, who gets 32 guys in the first round, the right 32? And I'm not even talking about going to the right team, just the same 32 go in the first round. There's always a Peyton Turner who goes in the first round from Houston that no one saw coming with New Orleans, that sort of a deal. So is Andrew Booth available? Potentially, and he'd be a good choice.
If the run on corners starts early, though, because this first round of the NFL draft, I think, is going to be absolutely wild with not as many quarterbacks coming off of the board in the first round. Who knows when some of these position groups could start going? One thing that we've seen in the mock draft watches that we've tracked is interior offensive line seems to be a popular position for the Bills at number 25 as well. A specific name that I've seen a lot is Zion Johnson. So do you think the Bills could maybe decide to go offensive line in the number 25 spot if there's no depth left or not as much depth left at corner or wide receiver perhaps?
Absolutely. And you guys have seen it up close and personal, haven't you, over the last couple of seasons, what they've had to do. Bobby Johnson was your offensive line coach during that time. How much mixing and matching did he have to do to keep things afloat? Just in the 2 years that I've been able to cover with CBS and do Buffalo Bills games, I'll bet you if I went back and grabbed my boards from each one of those games, the starting offensive line would be different in all of those. Injuries, having to make changes, guys being versatile. I thought what Ryan Bates did last year was exceptional, being able to solidify things at left guard, even though he had been a swing guard, tackle, center. He's played it all, and it was widely thought that right tackle was his best spot, but he's solidified things at left guard. So now, where are we going? Morris is back. Bates, you've matched the salary that Pittsburgh put out there, I believe. So he's coming back. I'm going to plug him in at left guard. Who's your right guard? Right tackle, I think, is going to be Spencer Brown, the rookie out of Northern Iowa. Remember, Darrell Williams kicked inside last year. So it makes perfect sense to have a Zion Johnson. What if a Kenyon Green from Texas A&M is sitting there, who I think is the best guard in this draft? If he's sitting there and guard is where you want to go, I'd send that message to the podium pretty quick. We always talk about running to the podium. We don't do that anymore because no one is sitting there in the audience doing that. But I would call it in awfully fast and make sure that I would get him. So even if you don't go in the first round, though, there is depth to be found with these offensive linemen. I'm going to give you it's not a sleeper, but it's someone not widely known. That's Tyler Smith out of Tulsa, a guard tackle who I think is going to find his way into the first round in this draft. And he's an absolute road grader. And your coach, Sean McDermott, I do believe, wants to run the ball with more authority going forward.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Smith and Kenyon Green, I mean, Will Ferrell would call those guys angry elves. They play with some attitude, man, and they like that up here, so that wouldn't be too surprising a pick. Two-part question here, Charles. As you know, there are
Go slow, Chris. When you go two parts with me, you gotta
I got you. There are 8 teams that do not have a first-round draft choice. So part 1 of this question is, do you think that will spur more trade activity in round 1 because of that? And then the second part of that question, if there is more trade activity, do you think it continues along the trend we've seen this offseason where it's been more player-for-pick trade rather than pick-for-pick trade?
I'll take the second part first. I do think more player-for-pick activity than pick-for-pick. I do see it that way. I don't know that the teams who aren't in the first round are going to be super motivated to just decide to dive in and find a player. If it happens, Chris, my personal belief will be lower in the draft, late in the first round. And if so, how many times is it for a quarterback? Now, this draft is not what I'd call super stocked at the quarterback position. And I have to be very careful about what I'm saying because I think my words will get twisted down the road. I'm not saying none of these kids can be top-notch quarterbacks in the NFL. What I am saying is, if you look at the grades that were put on last year's top 5 versus this year's crop of quarterbacks, the first quarterback, the highest graded quarterback in this year's draft, likely Kenny Pickett out of Pitt, I don't think he matches the 5th grade of last year, which was probably Zach Wilson. Mac Jones, excuse me, from New England.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying is that evaluation-wise, it's not the same. But how many times have we seen teams come back at 32, right? That's your number, and get that quarterback because now what do you get? The 5th year, right? You have a chance, develop him. Oh, I'm going to give you 2 names that teams did that. Minnesota traded in and got who? Teddy Bridgewater, who went to a Pro Bowl before hurting his knee, and that changed the trajectory of his career. And the second team is the Baltimore Ravens with Lamar Jackson. How'd that work out for the Ravens?
Worked out pretty well for the Ravens. Thinking about the quarterbacks that could go in the first round, the second round, wondering where those 4 guys or the top 4 guys go that have been talked about a lot. There's also unicorn prospects that everybody loves to obsess over, guys who may go way higher than people think they will go, or different players who you just fall in love with them because of their backstory maybe. So who are some of those unicorn prospects that you think people should pay attention to?
Well, one unicorn is Tyreek Woolen, the cornerback from UTSA, University of Texas San Antonio. Ran 4.23 at the combine, which is 0.01 away from tying the all-time record at the combine. But he's a wide receiver who just flipped over to corner, still learning how to play, but he's 6'4". So when you start to take a look and you say to yourself, are you kidding me? 6'4", runs 4.23. There's not a coach out there that won't say, hey, I want a chance to work with that young man. Now, Maddie, I'm going to tell you, I'd be surprised if he gets picked before day 3. Now, I can hear people go, day 3, are you kidding me? Folks, day 3 is rounds 4 through 7. Day 3 isn't just round 7. That's what everyone hears when they hear day 3. He's a project. But it's a project that you're talking about doing a lot of work with. He's a unicorn guy. Look, safety position, I think Kyle Hamilton's the unicorn this year out of Notre Dame. And I know early in the mock season, some people had him going number 2 to Detroit. I don't know that he'll go that high now. Remember, he ran 4.59, 4.56. I wouldn't worry about that as much. You see his length. You see his playmaking ability. You see him, how many times can we watch the Florida State interception from the opposite side of the field to the other side, and he picks it off? He offers all that. Plus, he's a chest-up tackler. He's not a guy who's just going to scoop your feet out. He brings that 220 pounds with him and runs through people. I think he's a unicorn kind of a guy at the free safety spot. He could very well go in the top 10, maybe no later than 11 to the Washington Commanders. So those are a couple, Maddie. But you got guys throughout this draft that we're going to look at and go, I've got to get him just for those traits. Can I go get a guy like that who, because he runs fast, because he jumps high, because he lifted a lot of weight? Deeper into the draft is when some of those guys start to come off, because this draft isn't quite what we've seen before, with certain people just headlining it and are head and shoulders above everyone else. The 3 top edge rushers at the top at the beginning, Aiden Hutchinson, right? Travon Walker and Kayvon Thibodeau. How much difference is between the 3 of them? I don't think there's one that just totally stands out. I think Hutchinson probably is solidified because of the whole package, and you feel like you know what you're getting with him.
Charles, what about positional depth in this draft? We've heard that it's a great pass rusher draft and that the depth goes, well into day 2 and maybe even further than that. What are the positions you would tuck right behind pass rusher in terms of depth where you could get a quality player maybe even as late as round 4?
Chris, the way we're playing football now, write this down and just use it every year. Wide receivers, there's depth wide receiver.
Yeah.
Okay? when I was a kiddo, it was running backs. Who would have thought the great state of Texas would go from wishbone pitches to air raid offense, quarterbacks throwing it?
Yeah.
That's where we are, right? That's how it's gone. So receiver is always going to be a loaded position. I do think that there's depth in the offensive line, interior guard, tackle, the whole deal. We're going to have that. You already mentioned defensive line, not just edge rushers, but I think once we get into rounds 2, 3, 4, some of those tackles come into play. Some of those, we always wanted to call them run stoppers. Nowadays, they got to be able to stop the run on their way to the quarterback because we're going to throw it way more. Remember, Brian Daboll, hey, we're a passing team that mixes in the run.
Yeah.
He's not alone in that type of attitude in the NFL. So those are some of the spots that I see, and I really think the running backs, we could miss having a runner in the first round. We usually sneak one in at some point. And by the way, you're kind of a prime spot we're thinking. If a runner sneaks in, Buffalo could be the one to take him with Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker or someone like that. But I think the running backs start in round 2 and get through 2 rounds, rounds 2 through 4.
I've got one more question for you, Charles. Do you have another mock draft that's coming out that we can look forward to? And how long do these take for you to complete? I feel like if I was doing a mock draft, I would just obsess over each pick and each team and go back and forth 20 different ways. And I'd be throwing out so much paper. My paper that I turn in.
You're old school, Maddie. You're not typing that up on the laptop?
I feel like that's a paper activity. I don't know. I feel like mock draft, I'm going to write it out. So do you have another one coming out? And how long do these take you to get done?
Well, Maddie, I've got 2 more coming out. I've got one coming out on the 15th, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then one more either Tuesday or Wednesday, the week of the draft. So 2 more left to do. And I'm with you. I'm old school, Maddie. I'm paper, okay?
Oh, yeah.
I'm this, all right? With a pen. And you're right, a lot of balled up papers going and what have you. And I'll tell you this. I can't speak for anyone else doing a mock draft, but I think we all have similar thoughts, and that is, oh, God, I got a mock draft due. No, it's okay. I know these positions. Let's just knock it out. But then you know what kicks in, right? What's the word you use? Obsess over every pick? Because your name's on it. So now you want it to be the best it can be. So instead of just writing names down, you're like, oh, no, I don't know about that. Oh, but they just drafted a tackle last year. Oh, God, they just signed this guy in free agency. So it changes everything that you do. Yeah, I totally get it. I obsess over it. And I'll let you guys in on a secret. The first mock draft I did, I probably did 4, 5 passes at it. You know, in the first 4 passes, I didn't have a single quarterback in my mock draft going in the first round.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And then I had to look into the mirror and go, hey, hold up a second.
Yeah, that's not
You may not have them rated as first round guys. But how often in the NFL do you go through a first round and no quarterbacks are taken? That's just not realistic, right? So I went back in and tried to figure out where the quarterback spots would be. And that's where I determined it. Look, Carolina, it wouldn't shock me if it took Kenny Pickett at 6 instead of Malik Willis. All right. It wouldn't shock me if Malik Willis lasted to 20 with Pittsburgh. Wouldn't shock me if Desmond Ridder somehow became someone's flavor and snuck into the first round, including the Pittsburgh Steelers. 32, how many times we talked about it already? Detroit holds the 32 spot. How many calls are they going to get from people who may have some interest? What if Matt Corral's still sitting there, who might be my favorite quarterback in this draft? That's why I had to go back and go a 5th time.
Yeah.
And I did more than 5 before I came with my final one. I had to do that. Maddie, the amount of time, I don't bother calculating it because it's the amount of time like you have to do to get ready for your shows, just like what Chris has to do to get ready for his shows. We don't count that time. We just want to find out whatever amount of time it takes to be ready.
Right. And to look somewhat intelligent, which is hard with mock drafts. It's impossible.
Listen,
There's too many permutations.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible because we all have opinions, and I understand it. My word is plausible. Is it plausible for that person to be picked by that team for what reasons, as opposed to just simply clickbait? That's what I try and do with mine.
Yeah, I like that approach. That's pretty good. All right, Charles. Well, we look forward to your upcoming mocks on the 15th and the week of the draft. We'll keep an eye out for those on NFL.com. Thanks as always for the time. We'll catch up with you down the line.
I appreciate it. Maddie, send me a couple of your extra pads, okay? Because I'm going to need them for these mock drafts.
I got you.
All right, cool. Thanks,
Thank
Charles, as
you.
always. We appreciate it.